think the program actually is the day after tomorrow. They first want to finish Bsides. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things, where our data is going, and what is have control of all of this. Now, first of all, a little bit about myself here. I actually live in Jacksonville, just up the road here, but I teach for science, and I'm their Dean of Research, so I'm responsible for the researchy stuff that science is doing. In particular, the Internet Storm Center, which is something I started sort of back like in 2000. How does someone get into security? Any idea? Why are you here? You heard about attacks, sir? Or maybe you got attacked yourself. Well, my first experience with security was back then I was still doing physics. And setting up a mail server. Back in the good old days, Linux was open, literally. Yeah. So setting up my little firewall gateway thingy, and with that, having a mail server that, of course, was an open relay. And it didn't take long for a spammer to figure out what was going on. I set up a little firewall next, and then the next security experience sort of came up. I'm getting attacked by everybody. They're like these Chinese guys, these Russian guys, they all attack me. Why? So one of the questions I want to answer, and being a physicist, you always want to collect data, is are they really after me, or are they attacking everybody? So I started this DShield system, which essentially collects firewalls from volunteers. In 2001, SANS hired me, and we integrated this sort of into what's now the Internet Storm Center. SANS has a little precursor of that incidents.org, and we'll talk about some of this a little bit later into the talk, what this actually does, and how it all works, and what kind of interesting thing we do. But let's go back to Judgment Day. So, what's the problem here? What's the premise of Judgment Day? You have Skynet, right? Skynet just like all the data and all the information gets out. You people here are really just in the way. Like they say, everything is designed around people, which means they're always in the way. So anyway, how close are we to this, and how much do we actually control what's going on out there in this Skynet, Internet, whatever you want to call it, that cloud? I want to talk about two aspects. One is sort of that ubiquitous data collection that's going on. And secondly, all the devices that are then being fed with that data, and that sort of close the loop here and control things. Let's just walk through a random day. In the morning, you wake up. You have this nice device that helps you wake up, and it measures overnight how well you slept. Now, okay, you pour yourself a cup of coffee. There is this mug here, vessel it's called, that will exactly measure how many calories you would drink each day by sort of analyzing the drink that you have in it. And, well, then you drive to work. And you may have, from your insurance company, sort of a little device you plug in your car that measures how good or bad you drive. To give you a discount. Like Progressive has that. I've now seen Esurance, a couple other insurance companies have that. We'll give you a discount. You just plug this device and literally, this is from the Progressive website. It will sort of exactly measure how fast you drive and when you drive, sort of give you a discount based on that. Then of course, that drink you had earlier, you have to walk it off. So you park at the far end of the parking lot and you walk in, and your Fitbit exactly registers how much you walk. Now, the key part here, the weirdest, most creepiest part, here comes when you get back home and you play with your kids. And well, you just bought Hello Barbie. Hello Barbie has a microphone built in that will record everything your kids say to Barbie, so it can make appropriate purchase suggestions around Christmas and such. But this is a real product that Mattel proposed. I think actually the public outcry over it made them rethink it a little bit. It probably comes remand as, I don't know, what is it called here? Hello G.I. Joe or something like that. So anyway, where's all this data going? Well, if you speak, and we have the same thing with TVs, with smart TVs, if you speak into your iPhone, if you speak in your Android phone is not going to analyze the voice. It's sending it all out in the big bad cloud. So that's really where all the data ends up. And with that, this is just sort of a small walk through sort of an average day, and I have to admit I have most of the devices. I'm a little bit of a device addict, but I could stop every day. So now, anyway, what are some of these devices? Smoke detectors, cameras, security DVRs here, routers. All of these devices are around us. They're collecting data about us. They're affecting what we do, where we drive, how much we walk, what we eat, what we drink. They try to affect that. And at the same time, they're reporting back about what's exactly going on. Businesses are not exempt from that. Was it Target that was apparently compromised through an AC system? It was not properly protected. So these things that we surround us with, they are new threats now. If you think about it, just the pure computing power of it, of like one of these little devices that you have. Well, here, these disk storage servers, they're really more small business than some enterprise thing. That's a reasonable server, according to most standards. Municipal networks. There's currently a big thing going on where cities upgrade their lighting systems to LED. Makes a lot of sense, energy-wise, and also, I think typically they say within 3 years you get your money back in power savings if you upgrade to LED. Now, if you're the LED sales guy, you have a small upsell you can make here. There's something special about LEDs we couldn't do with traditional streetlights. Traditional streetlights, you cannot dim effectively. LEDs, you can dim efficiently, so you actually save more power if you dim them. With traditional streetlights, you don't really save much power if you dim them. Okay, why does it matter? Because we have traffic lights. And your traffic lights can tell you whether there's traffic on a certain stretch of road or not. So by networking those LED streetlights with your traffic lights, you get another like 20–30% in power savings, which is X number more cops on the street, sort of talking about municipal networks. And of course, all of this now is networked. How many streetlights are there in Orlando? A lot. So how are you going to secure a lot of streetlights that are now networked, that network with traffic lights? Oh, this little orange thing here, I love that one. It's a trash can fill sensor. Cities have the problem that in parks or such, they have to send a guy around to check if the trash cans are full. If they do it too often, then they pay too much money. If they don't do it enough, then you have trash all over the place. This will alert you if the trash can is full and needs to be emptied. So again, it's a small network device. Anyway, what this all comes down to is this Internet of Things. Now, this is a crafter from Cisco, and so if you talk Internet of Things, it's really a very different Internet than we originally sort of designed. The Internet was designed back here, sort of 70s, 80s. You had one big computer, many users using it. Mobile computing back then involved a forklift. So, very different from today, where how many computers do you have on you right now? Probably with an IP address. A tablet, a phone, maybe a watch. So, a laptop. So really that changed very much, and you're really assuming that right now it's sort of about 3 computers per person is not unreasonable. Probably for the crowd here it's more like 5 or 6 per person right now on you. So anyway, with that, we also need to think a little bit about different protocols. I guess that the Internet as we know it now, the legacy IPv4 Internet, was not really designed for that many systems, mobile computing, all of that. So IPv6, that's, for example, those streetlights. They only talk IPv6. Did you ever try to do subnetting for like 100,000 systems? And keep that somewhat dynamic and easy to update and such. So that doesn't work. So yeah, definitely IPv6 is one of this, but it's not the only thing. Also, your layer 2 protocols change somewhat. IPv6 over low power wireless personal area networks. That's one protocol that, for example, these streetlights use, these trash can sensors use. Wi-Fi wouldn't really work for them very well. It takes too much power. This is really more similar to like Bluetooth. It's a similar, inherent similar protocol than Bluetooth. Low power requirement, low hardware requirement. I believe the requirement is the entire stack has to fit into 60 kilobytes of memory. Any of the young kids here that ever did any coding, you probably don't know what kilobytes are. So anyway, that the entire stack has to fit in. Security, actually thought a little bit about that. So what about the security of this? The requirement for the standard is it has to use AES encryption. It's a good encryption standard, or AES. You know, sort of what kind of encryption standard it is? Symmetric. What does symmetric mean? I need a shared key. How do you share a key between 100,000 light bulbs? They didn't put a key distribution protocol in there. You know, with IPsec and such, we can use AES, but then we have IPE and such to hand out keys. We don't have that in this protocol. So that, of course, leads to some obvious problems. And one problem already existed here was, well, light bulbs. What did they do? Since we can't really distribute keys, we just put them in as the light bulb is built. Okay. And we put the same key into every single light bulb. Oh, we don't tell anybody about that key. It was before the light bulbs went on sale where someone reverse engineered it and reverse engineered the key. Now, these light bulbs eventually have to sort of create an uplink. So the way they work is one of the light bulbs will be your Wi-Fi link to your Wi-Fi access point. And since any light bulb can be the access point, you now distribute your wireless credentials, your WPA credentials, within that light bulb network using the symmetric key anybody knows. So by connecting that insecure network to your relatively secure network, your Wi-Fi network, you actually make that network weaker and now allow access to that network. Anyway, the other problem, new platforms. For the most part, if you're sort of a system admin, you have to deal with Unix and Windows. But all of these devices use sort of derivatives of either. They don't use quite the normal Linux or Unix. They don't use quite the normal Windows if you're running Windows on those. And we'll talk about a couple of devices where Windows is sort of one of the options they use. So anyway, before I move on, I started out with that Judgement Day theme. I don't want this to be sort of a butt talk, fear, uncertainty, doubt. I say, hey, everything is bad, everything is going to break. I'm going to tell you how it's already broken. Looking at some real incidents. And that sort of gets a little bit to the Storm Center that I run for SANS, because the incidents I'm going to talk about were sort of things we birthed as part of the Storm Center. What is it about? Well, as I've described, it's a global network information sharing community. Like I described one part of it earlier. That's sort of the DShield part, collects logs automatically. Before I was hired by SANS, sort of to set up this internet storm center, SANS had another site called incidents.org. Incidents.org was actually created in '99 to help sort of with the Y2K handover. Everybody remembers Y2K? One of the fears there was, well, what happens if someone takes advantage of a vulnerability that's going to be discovered and then uses it sort of during the Y2K cut over when all hell breaks loose to sort of take over networks. So SANS set up this website, incidents.org, where people could just email in and people sort of post various issues. After Y2K, SANS initially took it down, and then people said, where did incidents.org go? It was actually a fun site. And you could actually see what other people are seeing. So Internet Storm Center is really incidents.org, where people are emailing in and reporting in what they're seeing in the network. And DShield.org, which is sort of the automated part. And we expanded that to web logs and other types of logs that we are collecting here. I'd say it's going on essentially since the DShield part, since about November 2000. So we have logs going quite far back. It's sort of nice to see sort of what happened over the years. So that's really sort of how it works. One thing is that we pride ourselves that when we receive something, we try to turn it around and post something about it really fast. It's not a CERT or something like this. You know, US CERT is a great organization, but what they do is, if there's a new vulnerability, they research it, and then a couple of days later, they publish a detailed write-up about what everything is. Quite often, what we do is, hey, someone sent this in. Anybody knows what this is about? And then hopefully people will report back and tell us more about it. And that's sort of a little bit the power of it. That's sort of how it works best. Now, sometimes we sort of have these write-ups too, where we just say, hey, we saw this and get how it works. It's something simpler than that. But anyway, we have a group of volunteers that helps us sort of analyze all that data. And I sort of just put the little world map up here. It's really a worldwide group that helps us. Now, we also try to recruit people from different industries and such, like educational organizations, banking, and such. So if someone reports something in, you know, we basically have someone on the team that knows a little bit more background about it. Because sometimes it's not just a technical problem, it's also a business problem. How important this is actually. But anyway, all of our data is free to download, to access. So all these logs and such, we have various feeds here that we have. Creative Commons license, just don't resell it. That's basically our requirement. If you resell it, then give us a cut. But anyway, one thing I just want to say here is, if you run a firewall, a web server, particularly home stuff, no hobby stuff, send us your logs. So to help us build sort of a better database. And anyway, so how did it all start? Let's talk about an incident here. We got this phone call. ISP in Wyoming. Okay, weird stuff happens in Wyoming, I heard. So he was telling us that he's using Linksys routers for his customers. And all for a sudden, those Linksys routers spit out a ton of traffic on port 80 and 8080. Now he isolated to the Linksys router. Like initially he wasn't sure, is it a computer connected to the router or something like this? Like one common issue these days is the TV got infected, so you turn off the computer and traffic keeps going. That's probably a TV, that's probably a smart TV. But anyway, he had them disconnect everything, turn off the Wi-Fi, and these routers kept on spitting out traffic. Once you rebooted the router, it stopped. And then it started up again after a while. Weird. Now we have this firewall database. So we went in and checked. Any uptick here? Problem? Everybody's scanning port 80 all the time anyway. So it's really hard to sort of see a significant uptick here in traffic, you know, on port 80 or 8080. So that didn't help us too much. But I mentioned earlier, we also have web logs, and we have a pretty neat Honeypot. They're actually an ISP in Europe, sends us all of their unused IP address space. Whenever someone tries to connect to unused IP address, they're sending them to our Honeypot. And we looked at that. And we saw this weird request sort of pop up. HNAP1. Anybody ever seen that? It's a protocol that ISPs use to manage routers. It's something Linksys puts in some of the routers, and then an ISP like the guy in Wyoming, and you can remote configure the routers. Great, so I read up a little bit on it. There were some old vulnerabilities in this, but I got all those routers. What happens when you send this HNAP1 to this router? Well, it returns an XML document with all the details about the router, like what firmware is being used, what model you have. At some point, it also, to be more helpful, returned a password on the router. They turned that off for some reason. But anyway, so we got great. Evidently, someone is probing our Honeypot for these routers. So I set up that page. Whenever someone sent in HNAP1, it returned the page for this one router I had around. And then this happened. The next thing they sent was they tried to access this URL. Interesting. And while it was going on, we were sort of updating our post, saying, okay, we see this request coming. Anybody knows anything about it? What confused me the most was they used authentication. And this is basic authentication, so you can easily revert this password. It's a username admin and a complex password. So maybe this is a default password. It happened before that there's some hidden password in there for maintenance purposes. Now, they didn't reuse the same password. So this was weird. So we posted it, and the guy wrote in, I just saw your post. Interestingly, I just a couple of weeks ago reported to Belkin, which owns Linksys now, that there is a problem with this TM unplug. First of all, it doesn't matter what password you send. All passwords work. You just have to send the password. Secondly, there's an arbitrary code execution vulnerability here. TM unplug, by the way, TM stands for Trend Micro. It's a security feature in the router to allow you to filter URLs and such. And so that script, all you have to do is you just add your shell commands as a post, and it will be executed. And indeed, that's what we saw with these routers. What we saw next is, once we sort of took the malware apart, was something we called the Moonborn, because it used this. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the movie, it's a pretty bad movie. But there's a movie called Moon, it sort of used artwork from that movie, it's a sci-fi movie. So anyway, what were they after? Well, first of all, one thing we found, and that's very typical with the Internet of Things stuff with these devices, it's not as easy to do your reverse analysis as it is with the Windows malware you're used to. For Windows malware, you have all kinds of instrumentation, specially configured virtual images and such that you can use to run the malware, see what it does, load it up in debuggers, and all that good stuff. This one runs on ARM, MIPS. VMware doesn't do MIPS. You need a QEMU, which is sort of one virtualization environment that does MIPS, but then the standard router firmware doesn't necessarily run because it expects sort of certain hardware components like wireless cards and such. Without them, it doesn't really run, and emulating that is a pain. Luckily, these routers were vulnerable, and with this vulnerability, it was also possible to turn on the telnet server on the router, and then you could just log in and you just watch the malware running, and then load a couple other tools and such on the router to analyze what the malware is doing. Well, what was this malware doing? Oops. This malware was actually trying to mine Bitcoin. And we'll get back to that later. So anyway, what's next? The next thing we saw came actually sort of over the DShield system. We saw a real big increase in the scans for port 5000. Not port 5000, that's not port 80 or 8080. But there are a number of web-based admin interfaces and such that like to listen on port 5000. But we didn't really know where does it come from. So we posted this, anybody sees it. What we then in particular want is people who send that traffic. Check your network, in your network scanning for port 5000. Show us what it is. What was it? DVRs. In particular, these are these little security camera DVRs. So not your TiVo, but you probably have seen them at Walmart. It's actually security cameras you can put around your house, and they all go back to sort of a little DVR. Yeah? What's that DVR? Well, it's a hard disk and a little Linux system. That's really what it is. So anyway, what was the exploit they used? Default password. Root and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure if this qualifies as an exploit if you can just log in. The tricky part here, I got myself one of those. When you buy them, it's a little white box, in this case, and a mouse. And then you have an on-screen keyboard, which is a numeric keyboard. So really, you can almost only enter your numeric passwords. I'll show you this in a second. But anyway, once DVR was compromised, again, they put a Bitcoin miner in here. I think that's sort of standard practice. But then they started scanning for port 5000. And what they particularly looked for was another device. Anybody familiar with Synology? Sort of these network disk storage devices. All of them have fun web apps installed on them. And I don't want to just hit on Synology, QNAP or whatever. It had similar problems. Here, it just was exploited in a sort of on a larger scale. Yeah? So here's just the admin interface for this particular DVR. Like just numeric keyboard. If you find that little yellow thingy up there, if you click on the number 1, 2, 3, you get actually a full alphanumeric keyboard. But you have to sort of figure it out on yourself. There's also, at least in this version of the firmware, no way to turn off the telnet server. You can turn off the HTTP, HTTPS server, and all kinds of stuff. You change ports on that. But you cannot turn off the telnet server. That's something they changed after we talked to them. So the newer version, the telnet server is disabled by default, and there's now a switch. You can turn it on if you insist on it. And you can change the password. But yeah, strong passwords is for people who can't do incident response. So anyway.
I love the fact that after we talked to them, it's still a telnet server and not an SSH.
Yeah, so Hal was saying here, it's still a telnet server, not an SSH server. That encryption stuff, isn't it broken anyway? It's way too complicated. Actually, it's sort of almost funny, the Bitcoin miner they had on this. When we posted, someone was setting up actually this Twitter account, and tweeted us, hey, it's us! We are running that Bitcoin mining, especially Litecoin, but mining botnet. And they gave us access to their back end, like how many systems they had infected before they shut it down, and how many Litecoins they mined. I sort of roughly added up, I think it was about $2 worth. So that's not necessarily why you run sort of a big malware operation like that. What they were really after, and was not this group, it's the other group, because like with any vulnerable device, after a while you find like multiple pieces of malware on them. And sort of luckily, not luckily, once you log into the device, it's actually still hard to change your password. The password command you usually use on Linux is missing from that system. You have to manually edit the shadow file or so to enter a new password there. So they don't make it easy. But what this led to is these kids weren't able to change the password, so other people exploited the same device and then started scanning for Synology systems. Yeah, this is sort of how they transferred binaries to the device. The device did not have an FTP or HTTP client on it. I think there was a TFTP, but it wasn't really working very well. So they sort of came up with this method of echoing the binary. And they have a little Python script that sort of automates that. And with that, they were copying then tools like wget and such to that device to sort of make it a little bit easier to work with or hear their Bitcoin miner. Sort of remind me a little bit of Kermit and such. But anyway, so what they were really after then was these Synology devices. In particular, one thing about these security cameras, many smaller, medium-sized businesses set them up and then have an outside company monitor the cameras. Which means, hey, let's open up that port in the firewall, and because we don't really know which port we need to open, let's just open up all, that way it will work. So now this DVR became sort of that beachhead into a network and allowed access to devices like the Synology device, which you may not necessarily want to expose on the internet. Well, sometimes that happens too, but not always. Number of vulnerabilities. The one they particularly exploit was this Webman vulnerability. I didn't really know that people were still using Webman, but I guess Synology figured that's a tool for them to use to sort of manage that device. And, well, it led to a number of interesting compromises. Now, these compromises, they steal your data. Recently, hackers have found out, yes, you can take social security numbers and sell them. But then again, all social security numbers are public anyway. So the value of social security numbers is not really all that high. How much are you going to get for 30,000 social security numbers? A couple $100 or something like that? If you sell them in bulk. What they figured out is that data is actually more worth to you than it is to someone out there on the internet trying to buy that data. Anybody remembers CryptoLocker? Anybody got hit by CryptoLocker? Anybody's mom got, or friend or someone like this got hit by CryptoLocker? Because now they get like the $100, $200 or whatever they ask for. Well, along came Synology. Synology now encrypted your Synology storage device. Didn't you buy your mom a backup drive before? Like after Synology, because that's how you defend kind of against CryptoLocker. But now your network backup drive is encrypted too. There was lately a little variation of this, where what they did was not encrypt the disk storage device, and it was a compromised web application, where what they actually did is they put in a little shim that encrypted all data going into the database and decrypted all data going out of the database. In the web app, using great my encrypted database compliance checkmark, and it just set it up for me. The only problem was after 6 months they removed the key, and then basically asked for ransom, again, sort of holding your data hostage. Kind of was the idea here. But anyway, so that's all the attacks I talked about so far are what I would call less sophisticated attacks, and sometimes. They're very persistent, the not so advanced persistent threat. They scan the internet over and over for simple misconfigured devices. I'm not sure if you saw it, but the Others of Device issue just was published last week, I think. Someone looked at how many of these devices are exposed to the internet without sufficient password protections and such. Oh, and then Google indexes them for you. Try to search for passport applications and then limit yourself to like a big ISP like Comcast.com or RR.com or something like that, and you get a bunch back. But anyway, so these are all relatively standard, widespread exploits. I promised you a Windows device. Inventory scanners. Okay, they run Windows XP. Yes, they're still selling it. When is Windows XP embedded? I think end of this year or something like that. I don't keep track of the. But it's the embedded version of Windows XP runs on this inventory scanner. What this company found out is those inventory scanners all of a sudden try to talk to other parts of the network they weren't supposed to talk to. And they were specifically looking for open file shares with names like accounting. The other interesting part here, so okay, you get a device like this. What's the first thing you're trying to do? Reset, factory reset, download the firmware, install the firmware again. Maybe it sort of got compromised somewhere on the way. Put in the right serial number, you got the right certified pre-pwned firmware back for this particular device. So anyway, specifically built to exfiltrate data. So that was the purpose of this device. How do you verify that the version of Windows XP embedded is authentic that you have on a device like this? You can download the firmware image, and you can check your signatures and such. In this case, it was one of the custom drivers. You know, all of these devices have some custom drivers for their IR component, like for their scanning components and such. One of those drivers contained the additional payload. And with that, of course, it was pretty much undetectable You can't install your create sort of whitelist solution usually, you know, on an inventory scan. But anyway, I don't want to keep you hanging here thinking it's over. Let's talk a little bit about what we possibly can do to secure the Internet of Things. Being the science and training people, I like this. Since we have no more devices, we need more security professionals. So the city of Orlando has like, you know, 1,000 computers, and they probably have like one InfoSec guy. Now they install 10,000 more light bulbs, so now they need 10 security guys. That's not going to work. You can't really just ramp up, hire a guy for each device. It's not going to work. Now for everybody who's looking for a job, that would be very nice, but we all know there's a limit to how many people you can hire. So anyway, like I mentioned, target. One of the things I often mentioned with target was network segmentation. Why is the AC network, the HVAC network, connected to the cash registers where the credit cards are stored? Now, I don't know target, but first of all, how many segments do you want to set up in your network? Maybe you do want to turn the AC down if the cash registers are turned off and the storage load shuts down. So there may be some. Think about inventory scanners. Don't you want the inventory scanners to report back to your enterprise resource planning system, the ERP systems, which is where all of your data is in? So network segmentation is a great idea, but it's really hard to sort of do that properly, in particular in a large, complex network. Start at home. Try to do it at home. Put your phones on one segment, put your laptops, PCs on another segment, put your smart devices like TVs and such on the third segment, and watch what breaks, and what kind of functionality no longer works. Now you can no longer use your phone as a remote to connect to the TV. So all these little gadget things that we like, and part of the purpose of network is to create connections and set it all up. Yes, helps, but not necessarily. So it's hard to implement. One thing you kind of have to focus on a little bit is onboarding devices. Think about these streetlights. What do you need right now in the non-smart street lighting system to onboard a streetlight? A guy in a cherry picker. So get out the streetlight and swap it out. If this is a smart streetlight, if that now needs a custom key installed, then you probably need a little more. Now this guy needs a laptop or something like that. You gotta have a procedure. How do we do that? How do we train that guy to do it correctly? Or maybe it's someone else is doing it before they're going out and actually installing that light bulb, whatever works here. But anyway, you know, that's something that has to be thought through and built first before you actually go in and install all those streetlights. Because once they're out there, fixing stuff later, that's what you always do in security. It works great. But anyway, how do you patch devices? If you have a Windows, if you have a Unix network, you have systems that do patching pretty well. You have your Windows Update servers and such, and you can mark which patches you want to install and such. All of that we are used to working. But for these devices, we typically don't have these systems yet. And we don't know how to sort of patch them or even figure out if they're out of date. So anyway, how do you deal with logs? There's one good piece of news when it comes to devices. They usually don't create logs, so they won't overload your logging system. But don't we want logs about things like logging failures or failure of the device in general? So what kind of logs do we need? How do we collect them efficiently without overloading our existing infrastructure? Because again, if you have something like QRadar or whatever, try to buy one that's 10 times as big as what you have now. And and see how much it costs, if it's even available. So anyway, how do we fix it? Don't buy crap. There's one spot. There's one spot in that process where you have leverage. And that's before the purchase order is signed. So if you're involved in a project like this, important part of security guys always, don't be the guy that says no, because then they won't ask you about it. But before purchase, that's when you may be able to get some cooperation here from the vendor to build things like patching and to help you with the scripts and stuff that you need to actually manage all of that, to integrate it with what you already have. If you miss that spot, then it's pretty much over. And then whatever you do in security should be scalable and such. So I'm going to give some of these standards as they build to be more automatable. Try to look into that, see if that can be adapted to these devices. Anyway, are we still in control? Somewhat. Not really sure who is in control many times. I don't think the machines are in control yet. Maybe it's the Google. Maybe it's the hacker who just pwned all of your devices that's in control. But the user is usually not really in control. I did leave out even the mobile devices, mobile phones and stuff like that, which really at this point sort of more behave like computers. Anyway, thanks for listening. We have about 15 minutes or so for questions, if anybody has any questions. Yes, sir. Yeah, so a little bit about the move from low power to low power Wi-Fi. Low power Wi-Fi, as far as I understand, I'm not an expert in the standard, is essentially just Wi-Fi with lower power. So you should be able to have things like key distribution, like in Wi-Fi with WPA and Enterprise, you can do things like this, and that would certainly help. At this point, what I actually see is really still a lot of low PAN 6. But you may see either network. The big problem with low PAN 6 was the symmetric key and no key distribution. Theoretically, you could also add that to low PAN. There could be a proprietary extension to it that does that. Like what this one light bulb manufacturer did, essentially leave it up to the user to configure. Which is fine for a home system when you have 10 light bulbs. It's not that great for sort of a municipal system. But yes, what's really needed is something like what we have in Wi-Fi now, where we do have some key distribution mechanisms. The problem is it takes power, it takes money to do that. Yes, yes sir.
You mentioned the location standard there, they had chosen AES as the encryption standard. What was the, we read about occasionally, oh, this many bits have been broken of this encryption system. Oh, we think that this is broken now, or we've got a proof of concept that shows that it's absolutely broken. What was the choice behind making it this one?
So the question is, why did it pick AES over a lot of other encryption standards that are out there?
Or even just giving you an option of having it requires encryption, you negotiate.
Yeah, so the other options of like SSL, you just negotiate the encryption standard. They want to make it, the reason behind defining AES and making it the standard versus allowing for multiple standards was making it simpler. Making it simpler because all these, and SSL, if you look at the last couple of weeks with the freak attack, that negotiation got sort of SSL into trouble many times before too. But in this case, we don't have the negotiation, we just fix it AES. Now AES is at this point the standard encryption algorithm. and it is considered safe at this point, and considered safe for the foreseeable future. What's foreseeable? 5 to 10 years or so. Yes, sir.
You mentioned exporting logs from the router to the ISC. Is it possible, maybe down the road, if I do export my logs out to your system, like view my logs?
Sorry, for you to view your logs?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I get
So the question was here, if you export your logs, you will get a web portal where you can log in, and you will get a view of your logs. They're then also hyperlinked. So like you see your top 10 IP addresses. If you click on one of those IP addresses, you see how many other people got attacked by that IP address, and things like that. There's also a daily report, which once in a while keeps breaking, but yes, so yes, the question here, yes, you do get feedback on what you're submitting. The question is, how much data can I handle? We do currently get, I think, around, last time I checked, was sort of 100, 200,000 IP addresses that report to us every day. It's a few gigabytes of firewall logs. What we really are looking for is more sort of web log submitters actually right now. If you have a web server, personal web server, like one project we have is, we call it a 404 project. It's a little bit dormant right now because we need more submitters, where you basically send to us all of the logs, all of the 404 errors, where people try to get to a page that you don't host. The reason we need more submitters for that is also privacy. I don't want to show users on a public website that a URL was not found unless a good number of submitters report the same URL. Otherwise, it's sort of a personal URL that you only have in your system. We don't want to leak that. Question here was, what kind of tools are we using? So for the back end of the DShield log parse system, home written stuff. Lots of Perl. I'm a big Perl guy. I think Python's for young kids. But anyway, the database is MySQL. The database backend is MySQL. And actually, the collection power, the backend, is open source. It's GPL. The public archive is a little bit out of date right now, but we're working on a more up-to-date sort of archive, public archive to code. Right now it's on GitHub. If you want it, like I said, right now it's not up to date, but send me an email and I can give you access to the to it. What kind of data do I want other than firewall logs, 404? We do have a web honeypot that collects complete requests. We also collect, if you're on Kippo, I'm sure if you're familiar with Kippo, the SH honeypot, we collect those logs as well. Right now just for usernames and password, but working on a system where we can actually collect the full interaction. Like one thing, for example, I have looked in the past is, how does the attacker figure out that they're in Kippo? And there are couples of specific commands they sort of tend to execute to check whether or not they're in a honeypot versus a real system. And you have to feed that back into Kippo development, where you put something in there that it no longer responds that way to these commands. Actually, Kippo did a couple of updates recently, so with the SH handshaking, so to improve it. Yes, sir.
What sort of online resources besides SAN do you recommend to stay up to date with security adoption?
What kind of resource without SAN? Is there something else in SANS? Yeah. Let me think. There's a good number of podcasts, like for example, Security Weekly is a good one that I would recommend. I have one that's like daily, but it's just 5 minutes a day. It's not sort of in-depth on tech topic as a Security Weekly. What other things? Look at vulnerabilities being reported. Like if you're more a developer, like I deal a lot with developers and I teach a lot of developer classes, I always say, so go to like CVE, look at some vulnerabilities reported, in particular against open source systems, and then you see what kind of attacks were used, how are they exploited? How can I protect myself from that? Even if you don't run this particular system. There are a lot of similar vulnerabilities in other systems. Like I mentioned, Synology, QNAP, all of these disk storage devices, they use the same sauce to cook their stuff. Well, thanks for coming. I do have some stickers and some business cards here, as long as they'll last. So I'll stick around a little bit if anybody has any other questions. Thanks.